As once again, we commemorate January 22nd, the Roe versus Wade decision, with marches and with prayers and special masses. Many might be asking, within the church or within the pro-life movement, and those who just sort of watch from the outside and say, what are these people doing? Why are we still marking this since, thankfully, the Supreme Court has struck down the Roe versus Wade decision? Well, I believe it's essential that we continue. Certainly, we can see that even though the Supreme Court has spoken and really pushed the decision to all 50 states, sadly, some states, for those who know that life is sacred from God, some states have already codified in their state law the murder of unborn children. And so the work isn't over. We need to continue to pray, to be active, to always, with love and compassion, reach out to those who simply don't understand that God is the author of life, and we've always got to respect His yes when a child is conceived in the womb of a woman, and whatever circumstances. Certainly, the church teaches there are really only very specific circumstances where the conception of a child in the womb of a woman is properly ordered toward God's plan. But even when that conception takes place in a way that is not properly ordered towards God's plan, the sanctity of that child conceived is still as great as when a child is born to a loving husband and wife that are committed in their marriage and open to more children. So this effort of the pro-life marches and marking this decision of 50 years ago that should never have been law, or the proclamation of the Supreme Court. Thankfully, it's been reversed, but we've got much work to do in the culture, in the minds of God's people, in the church or out of the church. That's important to remember as well. We have all these lines that divide us into nations, into different denominations and different churches, and all these things that sort of categorize us in one way or another. Especially with a newly conceived child, a child in the womb, from conception to birth, they are a precious gift of God's yes to the world. Yes, life is sacred. I am the author of your life and the life of this child. Whatever the circumstances, whatever culture or background this child is being born into, they are a sacred yes of God. And for us to say no adamantly and violently in procured abortion, in choosing to take that life and end it, murder that child because of whatever, we are truly going against God's will, because we can know very clearly that when a child is conceived, it's God's will that that child come to life. Sometimes, certainly, in many families, and we need to be compassionate to families as well that endure the loss of a child during pregnancy, a miscarriage, it's commonly called. For all kinds of different reasons that happens. My own mother experienced that. Some of my sisters did. Many women go through that trauma and that sadness of having a child conceived in the womb, but then something goes wrong, and that there's a spontaneous miscarriage with no human act causing it. It's just a natural part of that wondrous process. I'm certainly no scientist or a medical expert, but I've always loved medical science. And if you study the intricate things that have to fall into place, almost, one after another, just cascading, with everything has to work so perfectly for a healthy child to be born. And that's what we consider normal. The wondrous work of God knitting us in the womb of our mothers. For us to choose to end that, for whatever reason, is a poverty for the whole world, for our lives. And so, for all of those reasons, I think it's essential. It's not just, oh, it's a good thing. I think it's necessary and essential that we continue to mark that dark day more than 50 years ago, January 22nd, when that decision was first issued. Thankfully, just a couple of years ago now, June 24th, we need to celebrate. And I would encourage, as we have the marches, because certainly more than once a year, we as a faithful people and those who know the sanctity of life, know that everything I've just said is absolutely true, we need to mark June 24th as well as a day to celebrate, as a day to rejoice, as a day that through all of our prayer and all the pro-life efforts, the door was opened again to reconsider this drastically important aspect of human culture, of our civilization, much less the elements that we know as children of God are essential to living a moral life, living in God's plan for each of us, for our nation, and for our world. So as we once again mark January 22nd, let us do so with prayer, with loving and compassionate activity, with efforts to reach out to a woman who maybe unexpectedly knows now that she is with child, and to nurture her life and the life of the child.